The Dallas Cowboys made several very interesting roster decisions as they cut their team down to 53 players. We'll discuss it all on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Layden McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are breaking down the Dallas Cowboys' initial 53-man roster. We are not going to be going position by position or player by player. Instead, let's talk about some of the more interesting moves that happened on Tuesday, starting with the Cowboys releasing Carl Lawson.
Yeah, I mean, you're finishing signing him. Seemingly, the ink wasn't even dry yet. He comes out and he plays one preseason game. He didn't play particularly well, but I mean, that's not terribly surprising. He just came off the couch, and then to immediately be on the list of guys that they released. I'm of two minds. Maybe it is a case where they are having some buyer's remorse. That certainly is a possibility. Or maybe it's a roster mechanism that they probably knew that they were going to do when they signed him, and that's what part of the reason they didn't guarantee him money. So I think I'd like to wait a couple days before we kind of make obviously a final judgment on this. But it is interesting, that the signing and the cut happened so close to each other. It almost makes me wonder, like, if it isn't a case of them having buyer's remorse, because if they were going to do this, why even sign him before cutdown day, right? Like, why,
Right.
So
or maybe they just didn't like the fit. Maybe they
Maybe.
brought him in and they just didn't like it. One of the news items that we should mention that maybe ties into this is Tyus Bowser, who I kind of liked in the 2017 draft. I was kind of hoping the Cowboys would draft him in the back end of the first round instead of another defensive end that they took who will remain nameless. But Tyus Bowser has been a very good player for the Ravens, playing some off-the-ball linebacker, some edge rusher. When he was at Houston, he kind of played like an overhang position. But he's mostly been an edge rusher in the NFL, has been banged up the last couple of years. The Cowboys brought him in for a workout on Tuesday. I got to believe it. They're still hunting defensive ends.
Yeah, it sure seems like it, right? And I mean, I think, they've also had rumors about bringing in Dalvin Cook. So, I mean, clearly, like, they're looking at a couple different veteran guys to bring in. So,
about that. We have to talk about Dalvin Cook.
I mean, I had to bring it up just to see what your face would do. But yeah, I think that was the face. Yeah. I think, Bowser is an interesting guy because, he is an older guy. He if you look at his actual pass rush win rate, it's actually been pretty decent the last few years, despite being kind of an older guy. I wonder if there isn't room for both of these guys in some form or fashion, right? Like, maybe you sign one to the practice squad and one to the active roster, right? And see how that works. I don't know. I mean, I think that right now you're kind of throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall to see what sticks.
Yeah.
And I think that that's okay, because you're talking about the fourth or fifth pass rusher on your team. You're not talking about pass rusher 3 or 2. I think Nealon's taken on that role of defensive end 3, which that's good. But if we're talking about, that kind of role, I would be a little bit more nervous about what they're doing.
In a perfect world, if Tyus Bowser is 100% healthy, he's like the perfect backup to Micah Parsons, because he can do a lot of the same things that Micah Parsons can do, just not at that same level, right?
Yeah.
I just don't know where Bowser's at after basically not playing over the last 2 years because of injuries. But I want to get to some other surprise cuts. Julius Wood, who had an amazing training camp in preseason, who it seemed like maybe was one of the final names that the Cowboys were debating on whether keeping or cutting. They decided to release him. Are you surprised by that move?
I wasn't. I mean, he was. I didn't have him on my 53-man roster, but he was the last guy I cut because I mean, I think it's a hard decision, and I think ultimately what it comes down to is, the Cowboys have a lot of safeties, right? And they have a lot of needs at other spots. So, I think somebody did, the rough math, on a napkin, and they said that it's somewhere in the area of 3% of all guys that get cut get claimed off of these waivers, right? So there's always a very good chance that even the guys that we think will never make it through waivers will make it through, and that you get a chance that he can make it on the practice squad. But
well, and certainly at that position, we talk about this all the time, right? Like the safety depth in the NFL. Like if you want a starting safety right now, you can go out and get one. Like there's quality starting safeties out there. I've got to believe that an undrafted rookie free agent safety is probably going to make it through waivers. Wouldn't you assume?
I mean, one of the best safeties in all of football didn't sign his contract until what, like 3 weeks ago?
Not even
So,
2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I think that even as good as he has been in this preseason, I think there's a very good chance he ends up back on the practice squad and he ends up wearing a Cowboys uniform this year.
A couple other surprising cuts a little bit. Josh Ball, who we actually talked about on yesterday's show. I thought Josh Ball had a good chance to make this roster because he could play tackle and guard, had a fantastic preseason. Cowboys cut him in favor of somebody else who we're going to talk about in the next segment. But just Josh Ball, are you surprised the Cowboys kept him?
Yeah, I'm surprised. Yeah, I'm surprised they cut him. Yes, even more shocked based on what you just mentioned, who they kept. So yeah, I am surprised. I mean, I think, and we weren't the only ones who, obviously noticed him. I mean, I think he was one of PFF's highest graded offensive linemen in the preseason. And I think I expected him to go out and play tackle when he was swapped back out to tackle from guard. And for him to kind of fall back on his face, and he didn't. He totally didn't. He played very well. I mean, all things considered, I guess, I'll be interested to see how this all plays out. If he ends up getting through and making the practice squad, I mean, again, I know I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth. I just gave you the stats that only 3% that would make it, but more than Woods, more than any other guy, this is a Cowboys offensive lineman. Right? Like, so everyone is specifically watching for who the Cowboys are cutting from their offensive line. It's a draft pick. So I would be shocked if he's good, that if he makes it through waivers, and if he does, hooray, maybe the Cowboys can put him back on the practice squad. And I mean, I was shocked by the way he played in the training camps and in preseason this year. He looked like a completely different player, in a good way.
Yeah.
So that one to me was honestly the most shocking cut of all these guys, if I'm being completely honest.
Just a couple others that I wanted to mention really quickly. The Cowboys moved on from Royce Freeman and Malik Davis.
Yep.
I actually thought Malik Davis had a chance to maybe sneak onto the roster. Brian Broaddus was mentioning that the Cowboys were considering Deuce Vaughn over Malik Davis. You're shaking your head.
No, because it's all the reasons that we talked about it. It's like you knew that he's already made it through the practice squad last year, right? Like, so like you knew that the chances that that a running back like him would get claimed off of waivers and that he would not, revert to your practice squad is pretty low. And when you consider the fact that you've got both Royce and Malik going through waivers, the fact that both of them would get claimed is almost impossible. So yeah, I think the Cowboys did the smart thing. They protected the draft pick. They protected the guy that maybe showed some kind of juice. That look, the only thing that's getting only person who's getting picked up off a waiver wire that's a running back in a cut down situation is guys with potential upside. We know who Malik Davis is. It's good enough to play and be on the team, but Malik Davis is not like claim worthy on cut down day, like upside type of that player. He's just not. Vaughn is barely that guy enough that but he was a draft pick, so that's why you protect him, because you think that somebody might take a flyer on him.
All right, Landon, let's talk about some players that made the initial 53-man roster that maybe surprised us a little bit. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. I love going to football games, whether it's high school games, which have started up here in PA, college games, NFL games. It's just so much fun. It's an absolute blast. And Gametime is now letting you get your tickets faster and easier than ever before. Gametime actually has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. And you can get 50% off Labor Day offers for baseball games, including the Diamondback and Dodgers. Absolutely phenomenal. I love Gametime. It's what I use to buy my tickets. You can get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy. Gametime is, again, I cannot recommend it enough. It also has the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 100%, 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's Gametime. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers, go check out the new podcast we have, the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast. Get the absolute best fantasy draft strategies from Vinny and Michelle, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Lena, let's talk about some players that made the 53-man roster that surprised us. And let's start with, I mean, it didn't surprise you, but let's start with the name Buddy Johnson, who was kind of under the radar a little bit this offseason, made the roster as kind of the final linebacker for this Cowboys team.
Yeah, he was on my 53 because I mean, I think if you watched training camp, you saw preseason. I mean, what have what have we been saying this whole time? Drumbeat, right? Drumbeat. And it's like you hear Buddy Johnson's name just kind of maybe not mentioned in the practice reports by all the summations of the guys making big plays, but like if you're talking about on a play-by-play basis, we get down to the third teams and he's making all the tackles.
Yeah.
Like he's making all of them. He's in coverage. He's making plays. He made back-to-back plays in the preseason games. He's, it's been quiet in the sense that he hasn't been making, pick sixes or sacks or big plays like that. But as far as just steady linebacker play, he's been really, really good. And I think the other thing to consider here is, again, much like Davis, you have to think about the kind of gamesmanship here that goes on this time of year. Johnson's the only younger guy with any kind of potential upside. He put out some really good tape. I have a feeling that both Damian Wilson or Nick Vigil, or I'm sorry, Virgil, or both will be back on the practice squad, potentially playing snaps for the Cowboys this year. Because again, those are older veteran guys. They would have been on the street if the Cowboys didn't sign them.
I would even mention Willie Harvey, because Willie Harvey, I think, is 29. I think he's also an option for the practice squad.
Yeah, and what's Buddy Johnson? I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure he's 25 years old, if I'm not mistaken. Young. It's like a first-year player. So, yeah, I mean, I think he's the guy that has kind of kept pace with all the rest of these other linebackers. I think he's been better than Johnson and on par with the veterans. But the difference is that he's 25. He'll play all the special teams, and he's got some upside.
Let's get to some other players. Matt Waletzko, who beat out Josh Ball for the last offensive lineman on this team. As Matt Waletzko's number one fan, I was even shocked that he made the 53-man roster.
Yeah, I was going to comment. It just it feels like this entire preseason and or off season, like I've been watching Waletzko play like hurt. Like even if he wasn't hurt, he just looks hurt. Like he's playing. He's
so like he's big hurt. And so lumbering sometimes.
But but he's also walking around like all gingerly, like he has a currently broken ankle. Like so, I mean, I was shocked, man, because I thought that this was actually Waletzko's worst camp. I mean, no, that's not fair. He was really bad his first year. But I thought he was not as good as he was last year, or at least I didn't have the hopes that I had for him last year. I was really surprised that they kept him. I guess this is still an upside situation with him because again, he is enormous, and there
I don't
is
even think it's an upside thing. I think it's going into, let's say, last week. Who is your backup right tackle on this team?
well, I was just gonna say I think that's a huge part of it too. Is you have to have tackle depth. I mean,
And,
otherwise you're probably gonna have to sign another tackle to come
which,
off.
by the
off
way,
the
it could
street.
still happen. Like I could
Yeah,
still see him. Like Chris Hubbard got cut by the 49ers today. Hubbard's been a swing tackle in the NFL for like a decade now. I could see the Cowboys signing somebody like that, or like a Cam Irving, or name your swing tackle, right? But it feels like, well, let's go as a placeholder unless a better option comes available.
yeah, likely, right? Because I mean, and I mean, they had to hold on to Chuma through the first week, so they're going to be IRing him probably, and then yeah, they had I'm assuming that Waletzko is they use in case of absolute emergency
Right.
tackle at this point.
Well,
So
because I get the sense that they kind of like Austin Richards as a left side player, whether it's
yeah,
left tackle, left guard,
yeah,
and they want him focusing on that side of the
yeah.
ball. They just didn't really have another backup right tackle on this team because even Chuma Udoka is really a left side player. So who was your backup right tackle? They don't really have one.
And I guess that was my argument is that I thought that they were trying to groove Ball into being the right side equivalent of Austin Richards, right? The right side player,
I thought so
which is
too.
which is really why it was shocking that that he ended up getting cut. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess you hold on to Waletzko, but I mean, even if you're holding on to him as a placeholder for someone else to potentially be another swing tackle, like I mean, I would hate to actually have to play him. Like it's almost like not even worth holding on to him. But here's the other thing I will say: think about where we were with Ball last year.
Yeah.
So maybe Waletzko can kind of turn it around after another year. It's been several years, but it was also several years for Ball before he started to look decent. So maybe Waletzko needs one more year to kind of just put it all together and get a little bit more smooth with his motion.
Two other guys that I wanted to mention that made the 53-man roster. Let's start with Deuce Vaughn, who
Yeah.
I think he's done enough in the preseason to warrant that third spot on the team. But I certainly didn't feel 100% confident that he was going to make the roster either.
No, I mean, he again. I had him on my roster, my initial guess, but I definitely had him as like one of the bottom guys on the list. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're protecting him only just because he's the only real kind of potential juice you have on this roster right now. As far as a running back goes, I think Rico's got juice, but as far as like in a committee situation, he's that guy, right? And they clearly go ahead. Well, I was just saying, go ahead.
I was just say the last thing that helped them is the new kickoff rules, right? Like being
Yeah.
able to use multiple returners. You had to have somebody else on there. He gives you the ability to put somebody else back there if Kevontae Turpin gets injured for a game or whatever.
And clearly they were trying to set him up for some other roles too, like with the wide receiver stuff as well. So yeah, I mean, I think they were preparing for him to be on this team. But that doesn't stop me from still eyeballing, the waiver wire and still seeing which running backs are still available or getting cut by teams. So
just not Dalvin Cook, right?
Now I'm getting mad. Now it's going to be my face that gets mad.
I think the Cowboys, because the Cowboys apparently had interest in Dalvin Cook last year. They had interest in Dalvin Cook, I think, at some point this offseason. To me, this was like, hey, come work out for us, and if we need to put you on our practice squad to just have a guy, we'll put you on our practice squad.
Yes, it could be that. I think it might be even less. I think it's, hey, come work out, and we'll tell everybody about it. So you can, I think you can like start possible. Getting into the mind of other agents and other GMs and that sort of thing.
One more guy that I want to mention that made the 53-man roster, Tyrus Wheat, who was on the 53-man roster last year. We kind of thought that he might be a better fit in Mike Zimmer's defense. And it turns out that we're probably right here at 6'2", 280, according to the Cowboys official depth chart. I know he can play special teams. He can be an oversized edge. He can play linebacker, I guess, if you need him to. Just interesting that he did make the roster over somebody like Carl Lawson.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I think this is again the politics of cutdown day, right? Everyone knows what Carl Lawson is, right? And also again, he's a vested vet, so he doesn't have to go through waivers. He can immediately sign back with the team if he wants to, on the other side of this, if they want to do that. Whereas you lose him, he's gone, right? And he's a guy that the Cowboys gave a lot of undrafted free agent money to when he came into the league, and that's because he was heavily recruited by several other teams that were trying to go after him. So I definitely thought he was going to be a better fit on this roster. Under this defense with Zimmer. I did not have him on my final roster.
Yeah.
Though. So I did think that he would be back on the practice squad and that he would play snaps for the Cowboys. But I mean, clearly they've got more of a plan for him than I thought they did. And again, it wasn't that he played poorly. I think he had a pretty decent camp. It's just he didn't necessarily stand out. But maybe part of this is injury and fallout.
I also just won't be surprised if he's like a game day inactive and he's just kind of the guy back end of the roster that gives you some depth and special teams ability if you need him.
Or maybe he plays more special teams than we're expecting, more than he did last year because of the new rules. Maybe that's the thing that we're not calculating, is that because of the new rules, this is the kind of guy that's getting more play on more special teams than he would in 2023. But maybe that's it.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about a trade the Cowboys made. A big trade. Not really. On Tuesday, we'll break it down next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Every day, as we're going to continue to monitor all of the moves the Cowboys have made and will be making over the weekend. I can guarantee you there's going to be some adjustments to this 53-man roster. They're going to start filling out their practice squad over the next couple of days. So keep an eye on that. Two more moves that I wanted to discuss with you later. The Cowboys decided to move on from Peyton Hendershot. That was the decision earlier in the day. They were able to trade him to the Chiefs for a conditional 7th-round pick in 2026. So this is literally the least amount of compensation that you can get. I don't want to talk about the trade, but I want to talk about the Cowboys picking Brevin Spain-Ford and John Stevens over Peyton Hendershot. Was that the right move?
Yeah, I mean, I think yes, that is the right move. I think there's a couple things here that I didn't anticipate. One, the trade, obviously, which is great for Hendershot. Go, maybe win a championship with
the Chiefs
with Mahomes. That'll be fun, especially for Mahomes. That's a great fit, honestly.
Yeah.
So that'll be a fun matchup. I can't wait to see him with the Chiefs. And then for the other aspect of it, I didn't think. Yes, I think Brevin Spain-Ford did more to make this team than Hendershot did, but I still didn't think that Spain-Ford did enough to make the team. I was surprised that he made it. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact they guaranteed him a lot of money and that they're trying to string that situation along a little bit more to see if they can get a little bit more. Because I do think he's played better football, more noticeable football lately, right? So maybe they just want a little bit longer with that situation. And yeah, John Stevens Jr., like, that's a no-brainer. He's been better than both of them, both Spain-Ford and Hendershot.
I just wonder if Spain-Ford ended up making the roster because Luke Schoonmaker has struggled to stay healthy. I mean, now he played every game last year, but he's struggled to stay on the field for multiple weeks in a row in practice. And John Stevens isn't really a blocker. So maybe Brevin Spain-Ford gets on the field just as a blocker ahead of John Stevens. And then in those weeks where you need maybe some more athleticism and some receiving ability, that's when we see John Stevens. The other move that it was interesting, and again, not totally unexpected, but Ryan Flournoy, the Cowboys' late day 3 pick, made the 53-man roster. I know when I did my initial roster predictions a few weeks ago, I didn't have him on the list. I had the Cowboys just keeping 5 receivers. Pretty cool that he made this team.
Yeah, I had him on my roster just because, I mean, the flurry of activity that he's done, since he's been back, the amount of big plays and consistency. The negative with Flournoy in camp has been that he wasn't out there for a long stretch period of time, right? Because he's dealing with the hamstring. So, but when he's been out there, he's been performing. He's put up every single day. He's made plays. that drum beat obviously applies to him. And then on top of the drum beat, he's making big plays as well. So he's consistent and he's making the big plays. And when it came down to the preseason, where we see it every year, Marcus, every year, right? These guys that have been keeping up, have consistently kept up the drum beat. They get to the preseason and they can't keep it up. They can't.
Yeah.
They can't continue it. It's the Tyron Billy Johnsons. It's the
John Vaya
Croppers.
Johnson,
John Vaya
Cropper.
Johnson.
Yeah.
Cropper's done it like 3 years in a row. It feels like now.
I was saying Terrence Copper, not just
Terrence Copper for sure. Well, yeah, we could go all the way back to those guys, right? Like Radaway's and unfortunately,
Radway, Raymond Radway,
but yeah,
Rector.
Yeah, so yeah, God, we could let's just do a podcast where we name old Cowboys
really
free agent wide receivers. So I think that it's it's just one of those things where they have to find guys that find consistency all the way through the preseason, and once he came back off the injury list, once he came off the bands and started practicing, he caught up with the playmaking of those other guys and then continued it when the rest of them just kind of fell off. So, and he's a draft pick, so it's not surprising. And I'll add one more thing real quick. His body type is kind of more what you're looking for in the X than some of the other guys. So I think that kind of makes him more schematically useful as well, because he could be a backup or an alternate option for the kind of Tolbert and Brooks guys out there as well.
I was looking at their depth chart today of their receivers. They're all basically the same size, except for Cavante Turpin, who's 5'7", 155. Like all the receivers are somewhere between like 5'11" and 6'1", 205 pounds. And then there's Brandon Cooks, and then there's Cavante Turpin. So it's kind of funny. Like you can tell the Cowboys have a type at wide receiver.
For sure. Yeah.
I'm going to be curious when we get to the end of the season. Is it Jalen Brooks who's seeing more of the field, or is it Ryan Flournoy? Because I kind of feel like those guys could be close.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I mean, Flournoy certainly put up a lot of production since he's been back. I mean, I think the thing is that, much in the same way that we said that Flournoy took it to a new level, Brooks has already done this in the regular season as well.
I just think Flournoy's a better athlete, though. That's
sure.
where I'm curious. Like,
for sure,
can he start to close this gap over the next 2 and 3 months? It'd be fascinating to see. I'm really excited about their young receivers for this Cowboys team.
Yeah, I think again, we were shocked when Flournoy showed up and took snaps in the regular season. I think we'll be less shocked if Flournoy does it, because I think he's shown
Brooks. We were shocked that Brooks did it in the regular season. Yes.
I'm sorry. Yes, Brooks did it in the regular season last night. We will be less shocked when Flournoy does it this year, because they've clearly shown a propensity to get these young guys opportunities, and when they've shown that they can handle it.
What's really interesting, and this is the last point before we go, they've got CeeDee Lamb on a monster contract, Brandon Cooks on a 1-year deal on a very, very small deal. And then it's Jalen Tolbert rookie contract, Cavante Turpin, a young contract, Jalen Brooks on a late day 3 contract, Ryan Flournoy on they are clearly. I think this is going to be the path forward with this Cowboys team, right? When you're paying CeeDee Lamb $34 million a year, you might be able to pay one more receiver a small amount of money, and then the rest of your wide receiver core is going to have to be on rookie contracts.
You bring them, just keep drafting them, keep developing them. Draft, 3rd, 4th, 5th round, get undrafted guys, find them through different ways, get them in any way you can, because you're going to have to spend less at the position when the top end is taking, 55% of what you have allocated for the entire position.
Yeah, exactly. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go listen to the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get daily insights to the best fantasy draft strategies so that you can win your league this season. I would recommend drafting CeeDee Lamb pretty high in your drafts, maybe even number 1. You can find the link to the Locked On Fantasy Football Show in the descriptions of this show, so you don't even need to go search for it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Go download our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.